Hi everyone, this is Susan with the Rhinestone World. Today I'm going to show you some troubleshooting tips for your Silhouette Cameo 3 when your material is not cut all the way through. We'll look at cut settings in Silhouette Studio software and some possible solutions that involve the Cameo auto blade itself. These are some great tips, especially for beginners. Let's go. Okay, let's take a look at cut settings here in Silhouette Studio Business Edition. If you've got a problem with your Cameo not cutting all the way through your material or cutting through in some parts and not in others, let's take a look at cut settings. So I'm going to move over here to the Send panel, and one of the first most obvious things that you could adjust is the blade depth. So this first setting here, and you see I'm referring to the red circle, that one's the auto blade, and that's the blade that sits on the left in your Cameo. I could increase the blade depth, and that's just the depth of the blade going into the material. Another setting that you could adjust when your problem is that it's not cutting all the way through is the thickness, which kind of refers to the force that the blade comes down on the material. So maybe you want to increase the thickness. In this case, the thickness is pretty high already, but one of the things that I noticed when I was trying to recreate cutting problems is that I had to change the settings in increments of 3 or more to make any difference. So that's good to know, to keep in mind when you're coming out here to adjust your settings, that maybe if you just adjust it by 1 or 2 increments and it doesn't make a difference, go ahead and try to adjust it by more than that to see if it makes a difference. And it's helpful to only adjust one of your settings at a time, because if you start adjusting everything at once, you don't really know what worked. So I happen to have cardstock selected here, but it's worth mentioning, especially for beginners, that you don't want to use these default settings to cut with. I mean, you can try them and you could do test cuts and see if they work, but a lot of times they're not going to work for your material. And so I have some pre-programmed settings in here. So for example, if I click on Caesar Easy Weed HTV, it automatically changes my settings over here to adjust. And sometimes it's as simple as you just had the wrong material selected, or you had selected material that you were hoping would work. But if you actually go look at the manufacturer's recommendations, or for example on our website we have the cut setting recommendations for our materials, and you can use those as a better guide. And another option, another possible solution here is this double pass. So this is something that you could try, especially if you have like an intricate design or something pretty small, and that just means that the blade is going to run all the way through a second time. So that can be helpful. It is also possible that it's a combination of things that you're looking at. So while sometimes you want to increase the blade depth, sometimes you may need to increase the thickness, you may be tempted to increase both, and that could work too. But keep in mind that sometimes you actually need to maybe increase the blade depth but decrease the force that it's pushing down on. So sometimes you just have to try different combinations, and the best thing to do is always use this test cut to try it. And another option that is available is if I go into the material. So I have this Caesar Easy Weed selected, and if I go into edit it, there's another option here for line segment overcut, and if I check this box, it's going to add just a very small, 0.1 millimeter line segment overcut. So that means that instead of coming to a corner and turning, your blade will actually go past the corner, and then it can make it a better clean cut. And that might work well for maybe something thick like glitter HTV on a small intricate design. that's something worth trying. In fact, you can just save this in your settings so that, for example, for Glitter HTV, that it always will do just a slight line segment overcut. So all of those things are good options to try. And let's move over to our Cameo and take a look at some things that have to do with the machine itself that you can use to troubleshoot this problem. Let's take a look at the auto blade carriage on our Cameo 3. You might even be able to see the blade setting is over here at like an 8. And one of the things that can happen if it's not cutting all the way through your material is that instead of being seated in the carriage properly, when you took it out at some point, you may not have put it back in all the way. So usually if you twist this around, you can feel where it fits in. If you drop it, it'll drop all the way down. But sometimes if you go in slowly, it can just kind of get hung up a little higher up here and not go down all the way. But you could make the mistake of pushing in the holder so that you can see the blue dot and it looks like it's seated properly, when in fact the blade can't come all the way down and make contact with your material down here. So this is one option to try, is to make sure that you've put it all the way down. Another thing that can happen is if you use two hands to do it, you may not have put it all the way in and you went ahead and put it in place, not realizing that it just needs to fall all the way down. And you'll be able to see the blue dot from the top to know that it's locked in place. Again, however, even when you see that blue dot, if you don't have the blade all the way down, it can be misleading. So that's another possibility, something for you to try when you're troubleshooting. For this next possible solution to our cutting problem, I'm going to take the auto blade out of its carriage and I'm going to get out my blade tool out of my little drawer and open this up. I have my blade tool here ready to take this apart because sometimes if my blade isn't cutting all the way through the material, it could be because there's a buildup of old vinyl or pieces in there, fragments. Maybe you were cutting on some thick cardstock and you want to get in there and clean out the blade and see if that's contributing to the problem. So I'm going to use the smooth hole, the smooth opening here. And I find sometimes that it's difficult to get a hold of this. And I notice that if I change the blade depth, so right now it's on a 10, and it's not actually the blade that is going up and down, it's actually this housing. So if I start adjusting this, notice that the blade housing is moving up. It's not the blade that's moving up and down. So if I take this down to a 0, now it's up higher and my tool can make contact with it. So I'm going to match up the two flat lines with the top of the blade and get a hold of it, and this is how I can unscrew it. In fact, it will actually grab onto it when you're unscrewing it so that it just holds on to the top for you. And this is where you can reach in with something gentle like a paintbrush and clean off any scrap material that's built up in there. And now I can easily put this back on because it has the top still attached to the tool. Just be really careful not to stick your finger directly into the blade. It is very sharp. And I can just screw this right back on. And it's important to get a good tight fit in there, because if you leave that loose, you can end up with more cutting problems. So I can even put it on there one more time and make sure it's nice and tight. That looks good. So if none of these solutions worked for you for this cutting problem, you may just have to consider that your design is just too small and intricate and you need to make it bigger, or you may just need to replace your blade. If you like this video, please click like below and be sure to subscribe here to the Rhinestone World so you don't miss anything. And please call us or email us if you have any questions. Our phone number is 941-755-1696, or you can email us at info@therhinestoneworld.com. Thanks for watching.